Let's think back to the wild times in the 1970s, from smoking in planes to underage driving. Here are all the things that were common actions for people back in the day, but are known as not acceptable in today's day and age. Smoking in a plane, for instance, is an action that really gets your danger warnings blaring. When you book a flight these days, you might think that a ride through the skies with full autonomy and privacy is something preserved tightly for the rich people who can smoke in first class. While not entirely the same, back in the 1970s at least, the people back in economy could still enjoy a puff to pass the time while they flew around. You would be surprised at how usual it was for people to smoke on planes. We know your first thought might be, but what about the kids? And long story short, most of them just dealt with it, and people were considerate enough to be mindful of them. Definitely something that spiced up those dull plane rides through blue horizons, but it makes sense why we cannot do stuff like this anymore, given the safety risks on planes and to other passengers. Imagine triggering someone's asthma 10,000 feet up in the sky because you could not go a few hours without your nicotine hit. Speaking of smoking, another crowd that would unwind via substances were pregnant women drinking and smoking. Today, pregnant women are not just discouraged from smoking or drinking, rather they are medically bound not to do so. In the wild times of the 1970s, however, it was a common misconception amongst people that these actions did no harm to the baby. You may wonder why people did not just realize this was a bad idea if they had any concern about the health of a soon-to-be-born baby, but pregnancy can be stressful, and women had to cut back on the migraines somehow. Smoking and consuming wine was how a lot of them coped and unwound in their private time. Naturally, as anti-smoking campaigns picked up an aggressive speed in America and an entire generation grew up with them, these ideas of relaxation thankfully went away from the public's mind. You might have heard your elders going on and on about how back in their day, kids would just go out and play in the streets instead of being glued to screens all day. Sorry to burst your bubble, but there is a lot of truth to that, and parents were significantly more carefree with letting their kids from the house in the neighborhood in the 70s. Spinning the block with your friends, who would usually be the neighbor's kids, was a common hobby. Kids grew up that way, and a lot of parents thought it helped keep them active and social, but they did not consider how it essentially exposed them to the unpredictable outside world. With literally no supervision, the next time your parents say something like that, maybe ask them about some horror stories they may have heard. With more incidents of children being exposed to sexual assault crimes or violence or cases of kidnapping, curfews definitely got tighter. On the topic of parents, in a lot of states in the USA, it was common to sit on your mom or dad's lap while they drove you to school or picked you up and maybe take the wheel for a bit. The thought process behind this one was basically just, they are going to be driving someday, so why not start them early? It's best to get them accustomed to the road and the driver's seat while puberty sets in, you know? Unfortunately, part of how the world can defy your expectations is how quickly something can happen on the road. You would genuinely be surprised at how many car accidents were caused by kids just taking the wheel for a few seconds. One inattentive driver here, another overly excited kid there, and you had the recipe for a car wreck. This fairly risky public habit is something we can happily say is better off not ever being a valid idea again. Despite what you may think about hitchhiking and how safe or unsafe it is, people in the 70s knew the risks and the pros. Knowledge would not stop them from hitchhiking their way onto higher and steeper trails in the name of adventure. Some would do it to escape the modern world and cleanse their spirit or touch some grass. It is good for the soul, you know? See, the thing about hiking is until you do it, you do not realize how scary it can really be. All those Cartoon Network shows painted a pretty picture, but on an actual hike, it takes one badly placed step. Just one careless step that could at best lead to a couple hundred in medical bills, and at worst, your body not being found. Thankfully, actual hiker communities in the States started becoming places of resources for people who wanted to get into the hobby, making it more safer. Speaking of children and safety, another common risk to toddler security was letting them stay in the back of pickup trucks. In the 1970s, there was an estimated death rate of 10 children for every 100,000 kids that suffered car accidents. Today, we know better than letting our kids sit in the back of pickup trucks without safety. We would not really blame the parents either, because after so much whining, a harmless backseat breezy ride with your child being visible in the rearview mirror does not seem so bad. Except the problem and danger arose when parents would leave common sense with the kids in the back. Naturally, the logical thing to do would be to seat an adult, or at least someone who could keep a watchful eye over them. Most parents would leave their children unrestrained, which spelled disaster in more languages than we know how to speak. After one too many local news headlines, people finally awoke to the concept of caution. You might remember lawn darts or jarts, as they were the equivalent to Candy Crush back then. Ever seen those cartoon gags where somebody has to shoot an apple off of a person's head? While throwing lawn darts in your backyard was not exactly as dramatic as that, it was still something that caused more than its fair share of injury. You can blame that one entirely on the people that let kids access metal-tipped lawn darts that could actually pierce human skin when thrown with any decent force. Plus, have you seen kids around darts? They throw those things like they have money riding on whether or not they get a bullseye. We are sure you can imagine what may have followed next in a typical 70s afternoon spent engaging in harmless fun. Many unwarranted trips to the ER and another childhood scar story to the collection that you could brag about at Thanksgiving. Since we are on the topic of easily preventable injury, cars with no seatbelts are one more 70s trend that in good conscience we cannot get behind. Just to get a cheaper deal on a janky old Nissan, people would skip out on seatbelts or take cars with barely functioning belts. What they were probably thinking is they would have reflexes quick enough to use their arm as a makeshift belt to protect whoever was on the passenger's side. What we can tell you for a fact is that superheroism should be left to Marvel and DC, as today, every driving school teaches you to buckle up before any drive. People back in the day were not adequately taught the dangers of not wearing a seatbelt, which led to increased fatal car accidents. But today, there is a federal law that dictates that you must be wearing a seatbelt while driving. Similar to the previous entry, and so many more on this list, we have children playing with chemistry sets, which sounds harmless enough in theory. It starts getting anxiety-inducing when you introduce actual harmful chemicals into sets that are marketed towards children. Mind you, most of these were kids who were just beginning to take chemistry in school and had not even fully gone over the periodic table yet. Sure, give them a full chemistry kit with which they can produce hazardous substances, because kids are just known for their cautious approach to whatever plaything you give them, right? Sadly, people would learn the hard way how harmful a chemistry class in practice can be. Due to lack of caution taken by companies to advertise the risk of their sets, many people suffered the impact of what they thought was harmless learning. Today, we will not suffer the same fate, as consumer laws dictate that any product with chemicals in it should be sold with a safety guideline and warning. People over the years started incorporating basic safety guidelines on a more grassroots level, but riding bicycles with no helmets on. There are many easier and more productive ways to get a concussion if you ask us, like signing up for a Muay Thai regimen near you, but the 70s is all about its love of bikes and BMX tricks. Skate parks that would commonly be used for kids to practice their tricks and stunts would be taken over by kids on their bicycles, eager and determined to polish their skills at the cost of their own skulls. As you may have already guessed, a lot of this activity was not under parental supervision. Remember how we talked about kids just roaming around freely? One of the ways they would have fun while out and about was on their bike and without the proper gear. One more precaution that people forgot and establishments allowed were trampolines without safety nets. If you think you know how high a person can go on one of these, trust us when we say the upper limits of a trampoline are not to be messed with. We all love to pretend we can pull off Spider-Man levels of mid-air flexibility, but let's be honest, if you fumble even one bounce, your entire momentum is gone. What happens next is a walk-in invitation to many kinds of injuries that could be prevented if safety nets were in place. Sadly, today's fun over tomorrow's future was a pretty popular mantra to live by in the 70s. So you had trampoline and amusement parks with people lined up just ready to bounce sky high with no reassuring safety to fall back to when they touch the ground. Pogo balls were something that came around in the late 70s and managed to capture the heart of every toddler in each state of the USA. However, fun toys are often either poorly designed or not at all safe, and pogo balls were a mix of the two. What were intended to just be simple rubber balls fixed onto a plastic platform ended up being very touch and go. Pogo balls inherently were not dangerous, especially if you used them outdoors and did not get too wild with your throws. Kids sadly often took to playing with them inside residences and in cramped spaces where they have a lot of potential things to crash into. These can be a real menace. Many vases had fallen victim to the whimsical trajectory of these balls, which nobody could ever predict given how bouncy they were. We learned quickly that some things should really be kept only to the outside. Clackers were another toy that got a bad rep because of some manufacturing decisions that could have spent a lot more time in the drafts. Clackers started out as these glass sphere balls attached to a string that you could just whip around, but glass is glass, and strings are volatile. So you had a toy that was fun to abuse and weak to any kind of punishment since clackers would shatter so easily, sending dozens of shards of glass into the skin of people nearby. At best, these would cause tiny cuts, but if they went in a person's eye or an equally sensitive spot, then they could potentially be a serious visit to the emergency room. Hence why the company behind Clackers came out with new models in the early to mid-70s that replaced the balls with plastic, unbreakable ones. A simple design choice like this could have saved it so much bad publicity, while also not being an unnecessary source of stress for parents. Moon shoes were an attempt by Nickelodeon to capture the next big trend before it got out of their hands, essentially so they would have a monopoly on it. Moon shoes had a pretty simple idea. What if you could have trampolines in your shoes? And so they came up with these funky shoes that had exposed metal strings in them. Moon shoes were awfully bouncy, and finding your balance while wearing a pair of these heels made them look like cakewalks. However, finding your footing was not the most dangerous part about these shoes, as that honor was taken by the metal strings, which were the basis of the whole idea. Leaving them unexposed meant a lot of preventable ankle injuries, and do not get us started on how easy it was to trip and fall while you were in these. Essentially, they flopped badly and did not become the trendsetter the company was hoping for. For the outdoor American who loved spending time in nature's lap of luxury, wood-burning kits were a must-have purchase. In the early 70s, a very adventurous spirit took over the masses of America as it called them to the woods in search of a down-to-earth weekend. Lots of the people who often went on these camping trips, which more often than not ended up being solo ventures, would be going out camping for the first time. Not equipped with any real outdoor experience, they would purchase these kits impulsively, thinking they would dramatically boost their experience in the wilds. Sadly, all they did was cause light burns, because you still need to know how to work a kit and not just buy one. In the hands of inexperienced trekkers, they were more of a hazard than a safety tool in those situations. No child car seats was the standard for American vehicles in those times, and that added a lot of risk for your baby in the back seat. Child car seats are specifically designed to keep children safe in crisis situations and to reduce the brunt of any impact. This helps to keep the child safe from any severe or lethal wound and provides some sort of cover. Why something this necessary did not take off until much later in America's history is beyond us, but the common car typically never included these. Most people did not even see the point in buying one either, seeing it as a useless and expensive purchase when the child was doing just fine. Sadly, some experiences do not stick until they are felt firsthand, and we can only hope for those of you watching that you have no relatable memories of what we are talking about. Another way people would often cut costs were those nifty chemical lawn sprays, which seemed to do the job if all you had was a very minor bug problem. For any real infestation, though, all people were doing was making matters worse and exposing their family to harmful pesticides. You know, there are very good reasons as to why fumigators ask you to move out of the premises while they work, and for a few hours after that too. It is so that these toxic chemicals can do their job and settle to the point that they are not a risk for humans. Spraying them without a care in the world in your backyard was simply a disastrous idea, and many rounds of DDT killed plants, bugs, and put family members in the hospital alike. People were not resorting to do-it-yourself versions of professional procedures for no reason, and using lead paint was one of those nasty but common habits. America was still not economically well, and most homes were not worrying about budgets for no reason. Wherever work could be done by a member of the household instead of hired labor, it was done. People would skimp out on going the whole 9 yards with their interior decoration plans and grab some lead paint, getting busy on the walls themselves. What was not common knowledge was that lead paint can cause extreme damage to the human body. Developmental damage, nervous system issues, and problems in your kidney. Lead is used in paints to help it dry faster and resist corrosion, and it is extremely unsafe for humans. Imagine having your entire home exposed to the substance. We end this list with a cautionary tale as old as time, and that is to never kick back and relax while there is no supervision at playgrounds. Not only was this a prime situation for children to cause injuries to each other, it also helped increase incidents of physical bullying. Kids felt like they could get away with it since there was no adult to rein them in. No consequence means free permission over the playground to the brains of most 9 to 12-year-olds, and that can be a pretty dangerous environment for some children in class. Parents would often just leave their kids at playgrounds without any kind of watchful eye and go about their business or chat the hours away with a friend while their kid exhausted themselves, all the while being blissfully unaware of what may be happening right under their noses. Nowadays, it is pretty common for people to have like 10 different forms of online financing. It is literally possible to transfer hundreds of thousands of dollars with the press of a single button, and in fact, most meaningful transactions are done that way. You might feel old if by now you still find yourself balancing checkbooks and carrying them around, since all the kids these days are onto Venmo and Cash App. Did you know it used to be the opposite? Nowadays, checks really make up only about 4% of all transactions in America. In the 1940s, there were about 2 billion checks in circulation, and that number quadrupled by 1980 when Gen X was thriving. Let that really sink in for a moment so that the creeping march of time really sets in, because from 8 billion to just a couple 100,000 per year is certainly a steep decline. Maintaining a proper checkbook is uncommon nowadays, and people either deal in cash up front or keep it strictly online. Maybe that is not too bad though, since it was kind of annoying keeping up with a checkbook all the time. Another thing you might remember from Jurassic Park movies or reruns of Scooby-Dooby-Doo is that people once relied on paper maps when traveling. They would carry a layout of the terrain or area to just have a sort of mental figure of where they were at a time. It was not so easy to determine your precise location down to the street or building you are in back in the 60s to 80s. Sure, nowadays you have GPS facilities in basically everything, even the cars you drive. But if you wanted to get around properly back in the old days, you had to have a proper map with you. That kind of had its benefits, honestly. It brought out the inquisitive explorer in people and made them interact with where they were more. Sometimes following a paper map would get you lost, but you would find yourself having a better day than wherever you originally planned on going. It is quite easy to get very precise directions now with online maps, so that kind of carefree adventuring is pretty outdated today. Of course, this does not mean stores do not sell physical maps to people, so if you are looking to go on a trip this vacation, buying one might be a good idea for old time's sake, and for times when your internet data runs out. Speaking of libraries, they used to have these catalogs that would fill up several cabinets that people would frequently use to help their browsing go smoother and easier. A catalog had every material that was present in the library, usually in some kind of organized index, down to the author and title as well as the subject. Some of these were alphabetically arranged for further ease, but basically it was a very convenient feature of old libraries in case you ever needed to pick up a book in a hurry. Or if you just did not feel like spending a lot of time searching and wanted to invest more of it reading, it can get pretty boring looking through an entire library. Physical library catalogs became pretty redundant with online databases replacing them that people can easily view and access way faster than the past equivalent. It really is a wonder how humans keep innovating technology to make life easier, but one does miss the nostalgia of a day well spent getting very intimate with your favorite library. Here is an additional fun fact for you. Back in the 70s, revolutionaries would often meet in libraries to hide after protests. During this time, they would surf the catalogs to find old news clippings or books that supported their cause. People sure love to make an aesthetic out of developing photos out of film and vintage cameras and photography, but it was really something that Gen X cherished and grew up with throughout their childhoods. Everyone had a Polaroid camera and plenty of film before a family road trip, or that one plan the whole friend group had been cooking up for months, just waiting for the weekend when everyone's shifts aligned. Whether it was the grainy and dainty quality of those old photos or the process of developing a picture that really immersed people in the hobby, photography done in that era was its own wonderland of fun. It also taught a lot of people how to click much better pictures, since cameras back then did not have half the versatility or beginner friendliness of the ones today. Nowadays, only people with a taste for those kinds of vintage visuals go out of their way to get film tape for pictures, and most cameras that even use tape are hard to find. A romanticized hobby for the kids of today, and a precious childhood memory for the ones of yesterday. It was extremely common for people to carry around thick encyclopedias back in the day too. From nerdy kids who had an early inclination towards science and nature, carrying basic ones with every dinosaur name under the sun, to big fat troves of astrology knowledge. People had an encyclopedia for just about anything, and it also made sense to have one too, and you might be wondering why. Well, today we have Wikipedias and other online resources that mimic the same format for anything we can think of, with even multiple shows having their own fan-made wikis so that you can keep track of all the lore. In the older Generation X, it was not so easy to constantly access information, and so conveniently too, you actually had to get up and go dig in the library for whatever the subject you were tackling was. Sounds pretty painful when you think about handling your university assignments that way. But back then, answering a question was something you could make a whole day out of. Feeling extra curious about something? Just head on over to the local library and browse through the encyclopedias they have. You'll either come out with an answer or 10 different things you never knew before. There is not really a solid point to memorizing phone numbers now either, since smartphones can save any amount of numbers you have and even rid you of duplicate ones to free up space. Nifty little things that we definitely take for granted now, because just about 40 to 50 years ago, if you found a pretty girl at a party and got her number, you had to memorize the whole thing if you wanted any real hope of taking things forward. Looking for a part-time job to make some money on the side after your university classes? Need some dire plumbing work in the residence? Want to reach literally anyone at all with your phone or engage in some kind of human communication? Get a pen and paper if your memory is bad, because besides remembering numbers, there was no way to save contacts, as the iPhones and Xiaomis of today so elegantly put it. People stopped doing that with the start of the early 2000s, and the 2010s were when phones developed to the point that this annoying habit we had to pick up finally was useless enough that we could put it quietly to rest. No more remembering numbers or frantically scouring through your drawers for that sheet with all of the contacts on it. Something that went hand in hand with a landline, telephone, or any communication related to phones that fell off pretty hard were phone books. People would have these thick logs with every contact they needed for any kind of situation. But now online directories basically give you any number that you can think of with added benefits. You can specifically search for a certain number, for example, making the entire process much quicker than going over the phone book again and again, not realizing you skipped the one you were looking for twice already. Phone books have not vanished completely from America, since places like Philadelphia still get around 100,000 phone books made and delivered each year. However, that number is a far cry from how mainstream they really used to be, which was a testament to how much people relied on them. Let's be honest, nobody liked going through the book, but it definitely was a convenient thing to have. Literary arts were definitely a more appreciated aspect of culture for Gen X. People used to take their handwriting incredibly seriously, especially since pen pals and writing letters, customizing handcards yourself, and preparing invitations were all things people did around the year, especially during the holiday season, which meant that your writing skills needed to be polished and maintained at least 7 to 8 out of 12 months of the year. Many people learned cursive for the elegance it added. Plus, it just genuinely looked beautiful. Receiving a letter in cursive was a love language. It showed you cared. It showed thoughtfulness and attention to detail, because they could have just left a shoddy-looking note that looks like a fifth grader's homework. Cursive writing meant that someone was going out of their way to make an impression. But that was not always the case. Sometimes people just loved the air of luxury it added to their journaling, and for some it was just a cool skill to have and mentioned casually in conversations. Now that everyone has moved on texting and the DMs, writing in general is a lost art, let alone cursive writing. So, everybody remembers fax machines, right? Big, tanky printer-looking things responsible for handling important documents, files, mails, common in all kinds of offices and hospitals. Now, we are really talking about some old-age tech because for a long time a fax machine was all you had if you wanted to get the typical service that emails provide for a lot of people these days. However, as widespread as these fax machines were, their time on top was going to end pretty soon. See, so far these were only so hot in the market because people had no better alternative. But when one finally did come around, it blew fax machines out of the park. Simply put, with the invention of the World Wide Web and modern advances in mailing and communicating, not only did fax machines become useless, but they also became very costly, making them twice the burden. Machines have upkeep and maintenance costs, plus all the paper, installation fees, supplies, and toner made it a pretty pricey way of doing your paperwork. Thank God for technology, because not only did they cost somewhat an arm and a leg, but they also took a lot of space and clashed with the interior design. Yet another common household item for Generation X that eventually got replaced by the forward march of human intellect and imagination were landlines. Phones today are capable of so much that some people seriously have entire YouTube careers on them, or get freelance work which revolves mostly around their phone, but just a while ago they were not capable of even a quarter of all that. Reliable calling between people had to take place using landlines, and every house had one. But landlines were prone to malfunctions or environmental damage. Sometimes a nasty little rodent would chew your wire and you would be stranded in your home, unable to contact anyone, and fixing it would be a whole day. Compare that to the ease and comfort of your smartphone, with which you can place a call without even needing credit now, just the internet. Some wondrous times we live in, don't we? Landlines were really a step forward for people all over the world, but even they look outdated in front of what we have now. Who knows if 40 years from now, kids will think the same about our phones. Alright, this one is definitely a lot more debatable than the other ones on the list so far. If you are from the X Squad, then you know all about manual coffee grinders and how they were a forearm workout in their own right. Sure, they took some time, but if you knew how to grind your coffee good and proper, you either had a possible future in part-time barista work and you would be the favorite roommate. Also, probably the one in charge of coffee every morning, which could definitely be a drag. It is just that manual grinders took a while to get the whole process going, and in today's fast-paced work culture, that kind of time is a luxury people cannot afford much. Electrical grinders are hence a lot more common because of the ease and quickness that they give, and they do arguably as good of a job, but some coffee purists and fanatics swear by manual grinders still. Maybe there really is some boost of flavor that we are not sure about? Now we feel like getting both grinders and doing a side-by-side comparison. Dialing in to know the time and weather is very much a lost custom that vanished as soon as smartphones took care of that too. Well, not just smartphones. In the present day, most technology, or at least practically anything that can connect to the internet, will let you know about the weather, and you do not need any Wi-Fi shenanigans just for the time. Even watches are something people solely use for fashion purposes instead of having one to tell the time easily by just checking your wrist, because people are so much more used to going for their phone instead. Hence, things like checking the time and weather via a dial do not really have a point anymore, but they had some ambiance to them. A pretty sky with some dark clouds hanging about. Maybe you think a rainy day is around the corner and call for the weather. Excitedly getting confirmation on your own little predictions and planning your day accordingly was a common part of people's lives in those old days. And we gotta say, that does sound a lot more exciting than just checking your phone for yet another thing. Digitalization has meant that there are now many different ways of storing things than there were before. As a result, physical copies of things are going out of style. Things like storing music on cassette tapes, DVDs, physical copies of video games, and more are now becoming obsolete in today's world, where everything can be backed up, downloaded, or streamed. Any kind of music you want is on Spotify or SoundCloud, and if it is not there, you can just head on over to YouTube. But there was definitely a lot of charm to having a stacked collection of cassette tapes with your favorite recorded tracks. Building up your stock was also its own little hobby that music collectors delighted in. But sadly, all of these things are a bit of a lost preference. Nowadays, even people who do it for nostalgia now primarily use streaming services due to the simple ease, superiority, and much larger library of music. This does not take away from how stylish listening to music on a Walkman was. As you would remember, having the newest cassette or a new Walkman was extremely fashionable, but today it is reduced to an unsustainable way of listening to your favorite tracks. Let's talk a bit more about the impact streaming has had on skills and hobbies from the Gen X era becoming useless, since even things like video cassette recorders are pretty ancient now. With the onslaught of DVRs and streaming services all over the place, people do not have much of a use for a VCR or the process of setting one up, which can be tedious. We would be surprised if people today even knew how to do that. Not that we blame them, it is not something they grew up with like the rest of us did. Still, it was lovely collecting your favorite movies on those tiny cassettes, was it not? Maybe it is just us, but all the effort that you had to put into a show or movie or any kind of media you liked also gave it some points in terms of novelty, at least more than browsing Netflix. Given how much access large libraries of music, shows, and information the internet gives us, things like TV guides also just do not really have much of a point anymore. Firstly, missing your show's time slot in general is a non-issue as of today, because if you miss something, you can go on Netflix or just pirate it either through MKV files, torrents, or illegal websites like PrimeWire, 123 Movies, you know the drill. Folks do not have much of a reason to buy a TV guide and check out the slots and programs so they know their way to good cable. Things like appointment television, as a result, have also faded away. It might be good that we can easily access our favorite media and explore new options, but there was certainly something special about it back then. Back in the day, during the golden era of the 50s and 60s, soda fountains stood as the heart of American leisure, buzzing with life and the sweet aroma of syrup, where dreams shone as brightly as the countertops. These were the social theaters of everyday life, where rock and roll tunes set the stage for teenage dreams and family outings. Imagine a lively spot filled with laughter and treats like malted milkshakes and banana splits, all to the tune of a jukebox. Though fast food and changing tastes have overshadowed them, soda fountains, with their sense of community, nostalgia, and joy over simple pleasures like an ice cream soda, remain a cherished memory of simpler times. Deciding what to do with a book of SNH Green Stamps was a major decision. A new set of dishes? A toy guitar? This was a treasure hunt where the prize could be as grand as a new toaster or as whimsical as a garden gnome, all tucked away in the pages of a stamp book. It was a communal hobby, a shared endeavor that bridged generations, teaching lessons in patience and the joy of saving. Though the digital age has introduced more direct means of rewarding loyalty, the legacy of SNH Green Stamps endures, a testament to a time when loyalty was measured in stamps and rewards were a tangible slice of the American dream. Anyone remember watching The Pink Panther or the original Parent Trap from their car? Drive-in movies are a nostalgic symbol across all generations these days, but only boomers truly remember the experience in its golden age. Here, families and friends congregated under the starlit sky, their cars turned into private viewing booths where popcorn was passed hand to hand and movies were watched with a sense of freedom that indoor theaters couldn't match. These venues were communal spaces where memories were made, where the first notes of a love story could begin against the backdrop of a Hollywood ending. Though the advent of home entertainment has led to their decline, the romance of drive-in theaters endures, a sweet note of nostalgia in the digital age's symphony. If you remember the 1960s frenzy known as Beatlemania as a first-hand participant, you're definitely a boomer. The Beatles catapulted into global superstardom around 1963, and their then unprecedented fan base is still an icon of the era. It wasn't merely about the music, though the tunes were catchy enough to hum for days. It was about the moment, the feeling, the unbridled joy of being part of something larger than life. The Beatles, with their cheeky smiles and Liverpudlian lilt, were the Pied Pipers of a generation, leading legions of fans through the streets of new sonic landscapes. Their concerts were cathedrals of sound, where the air vibrated with the screams of fans and the promise of youth. Beatlemania changed the world, leaving a legacy of innovation and freedom that still echoes today. There was a time when television whispered goodnight with the strains of the national anthem, a patriotic lullaby that marked the end of the broadcast day. This tradition, steeped in a sense of national pride, was a daily ritual that united viewers, a shared moment of reflection in the glow of the TV screen. It was a reminder of shared values and common dreams, a closing note that spoke of unity and belonging in a vast and varied nation. As 24-hour programming dawned and the anthem faded from the airwaves, the memory of this tradition lingers, a symbol of a time when television was not just entertainment, but a communal hearth, where the nation could gather and be reminded of its shared identity and values. Even if boomers were too young to remember President Lyndon B. Johnson signing the act, which outlaws discrimination, they've probably experienced the effects of the changes in policy it brought about, like the integration of schools. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 stands as a towering milestone in the journey toward equality in America, a beacon of hope that illuminated the path forward. It was a declaration, loud and clear, that discrimination would no longer be tolerated under the law. This act was a victory, hard-won by the sweat and tears of countless individuals who dared to dream of a world where everyone had a seat at the table. Its passage was not just a political triumph, but a cultural shift, signaling the beginning of the end for the entrenched barriers of racism and segregation. While the journey towards equality continues, the Civil Rights Act remains a cornerstone. If you wanted to call a friend or a business, you had to flip through the phone book to find their number. Were you listed in the white pages? It was a catalog of lives, businesses, and services, a physical manifestation of the network that connected us all. Flipping through its pages was a tactile journey, a reminder of the interconnectedness that binds us. The decline of the phone book, hastened by the rise of the internet, marks the end of an era of tangible connections. Yet for those who remember its heft and scope, the phone book remains a symbol of a time when the world was at your fingertips, just a page turn away. In the heyday of analog photography, flash cubes stood as tiny beacons of innovation, illuminating the faces of the 60s and 70s with a burst of light and a click. These cubic wonders, with their single-use flashbulbs, transformed the average Joe into a moment-capturing maestro, banishing shadows and brightening smiles in living rooms and birthday parties alike. Flash cubes symbolize the democratization of photography, a step towards capturing life's fleeting moments without the need for a photography degree. Though their glory days were numbered, with technology marching on to sleeker, more integrated solutions, the era of flash cubes remains a nostalgic snapshot of a time when capturing memories required a physical flash of genius 4 times over. ABC's Wide World of Sports was some of the most sensational TV of its time, capturing the essence of sports in America with Evel Knievel's breathtaking stunts as a defining highlight. On February 5, 1976, viewers were glued to their screens as Knievel pulled off one of his legendary jumps, embodying the extreme of human spirit and daring. His motorcycle leaps were epic narratives of man versus the impossible, capturing the imaginations of viewers and inspiring a generation to reach for the stars, or at least jump over a bunch of cars. This show expanded the horizons of sports broadcasting, setting the stage for the future of sports entertainment. Oh, how far technology has come. Back in the day, electronic calculators were the hot tool that promised to make long division a thing of the past, though the original tool was a bit clunkier than today's sleek handheld calculators. The days of slide rules and penciled equations stretching across pages were gone. In their place stood a device that promised liberation from the numerical grind. These calculators transformed education, commerce, and daily life, making the esoteric realms of mathematics accessible to the masses. Their arrival marked a pivotal moment in the digital revolution, a leap towards a future where technology would become an extension of the human mind, forever altering our relationship with numbers. Debuting on NBC's Puppet Playhouse TV show in 1947, the Howdy Duty puppet soon after earned his own show. Howdy Duty, with his freckled face and eternal grin, was a pioneer of the airwaves, a marionette maestro who brought laughter and learning to the living rooms of post-war America. The show was a medley of entertainment and education, a place where children could gather around the television set as a community, learning the values of friendship and honesty. Howdy Duty was adored, his adventures and misadventures sparking imaginations and fostering a sense of belonging among his young audience. His legacy lives on, a testament to the power of storytelling and the enduring charm of a puppet who became a cultural icon. In the 60s, people were putting everything in JellO, and we do mean everything: ham, salmon, lamb, cottage cheese, fruit. The list goes on. Thankfully, that trend has faded. From savory salads suspended in lime gelatin to desserts dotted with marshmallows, JellO dishes were a staple of family gatherings and potlucks, a testament to an era's love affair with convenience and innovation. These creations, often colorful and occasionally confounding, captured the spirit of a time when the kitchen was a laboratory for exploring the new and the novel. The JellO era, marked by culinary curiosity, remains a distinct and explorative chapter in American food history. These kids' bikes were designed to look like a chopper, with the high handlebars, smaller wheels, and that classic banana seat. These bikes, emblematic of 60s and 70s childhood joy and adventure, were the vehicles of choice for explorers of suburban frontiers, the companions in quests for independence and the thrill of the ride. Riding a banana seat bike was an act of expression, a declaration of style and fun, evoking a sense of community and exploration. The legacy of these bikes rides on, a sweet reminder of a time when joy was found in the simple pleasure of a bike ride with friends under the wide open sky. Air travel has changed in so many ways, but baby boomers remember when it was common to see people smoking on airplanes. This era is a hazy memory from a time when the skies were a little less friendly to the lungs. The gradual extinguishing of smoking on flights marked a turning point in public health awareness and policy, a shift towards a clearer, cleaner flying experience. This transition mirrored a larger societal change, from acceptance to restriction of smoking in public spaces, highlighting evolving attitudes towards health and communal well-being. Today, the smoke-free cabin stands as a breath of fresh air, a testament to progress in the journey towards a healthier public sphere. Sure, the 2004 Disney movie Miracle gave younger generations a recap, but there was nothing like seeing the miracle on ice happen in real time as an adult. On February 22, 1980, the U.S. hockey team did the unthinkable by beating the then untouchable Soviet Union team in the semifinals at the 1980 Winter Olympics in Lake Placid. It was a David versus Goliath tale that transcended the rink, igniting a flame of national pride and unity in a time of uncertainty. This was a declaration, a moment of sheer euphoria that reverberated beyond sport. Clipping baseball cards to bike spokes transformed ordinary bicycles into roaring motorcycles of the imagination, a simple pleasure that encapsulated the essence of childhood ingenuity. It made the most satisfying noise when you rode down the street really fast. This pastime was a rite of passage, where the value of a card was measured not in dollars, but in decibels. The ritual of choosing which hero to sacrifice to the spokes was a testament to youthful priorities, a balance between admiration and the allure of acoustic horsepower. In this symphony of cardboard and rubber, a generation found joy, community, and the simple thrill of making their mark one ride at a time. Technically, these types of meals are still around today, but only certain people will remember when these were invented. The first Swanson brand TV dinners consisted of a Thanksgiving meal of turkey, cornbread dressing, frozen peas, and sweet potatoes. Those iconic trays of compartmentalized comfort food were the heralds of a new era in American dining, mirroring the post-war shift towards convenience and the burgeoning TV culture. The TV dinner was a cultural artifact, emblematic of changing family dynamics, the rise of consumer culture, and the quest for simplicity in the complexity of modern life. Despite nutritional critiques, TV dinners represent the evolving balance between convenience and home cooking. About 30% of milk was still delivered to homes in the 1960s. Prior to that, it was by far the most popular way for consumers to get their milk. This service, emblematic of a broader era of home delivery, fostered a sense of community and trust, turning transactions into interactions. The decline of the milkman mirrored broader shifts towards self-service and supermarket dominance, yet recent trends towards local and home-delivered goods suggest a nostalgic longing for the personal touch and convenience that the milkman represented. Before digital communication, telephone operators were key connectors, facilitating long-distance conversations through their expertise in navigating complex networks. Later generations probably have no idea that you use dial 0 and then talk to a real live person to direct your call. Their role was personal, a comforting presence in the impersonal expanse of the telephone network. The transition to automated systems marked a leap forward in efficiency, but also the end of an era defined by the warmth of human interaction. The golden age of arcades was a testament to the allure of pixelated adventures and the camaraderie found in these neon-lit temples of entertainment. These spaces, buzzing with the sound of coins dropping and high scores toppling, were communal hubs where friendships were forged over joysticks and rivalries were settled on the scoreboard. Classics like Pac-Man and Donkey Kong were cultural phenomena that bridged the gap between technology and entertainment, creating a shared vocabulary for a generation. The shift from arcades to home gaming ended an era, but the comeback of retro gaming and arcade bars shows a nostalgia for arcade camaraderie. Ever wonder about those unsung heroes of the bowling alleys, the pin setters, or as they were fondly called, pin boys? These guys were the lifeblood of bowling alleys, sprinting across the pin deck, nimbly dodging flying balls and pins to reset them manually for the next roll. Imagine the hustle. It demanded quick reflexes and some serious stamina. Mostly young men or teenagers, these pin setters worked in a whirl of constant noise and movement, staying alert through their exhausting shifts. But then the 50s rolled around, bringing automated pin-setting machines that revolutionized the game. Suddenly, these machines were doing the job, setting up pins, returning balls, and all without breaking a sweat. This tech advancement led to the rapid disappearance of manual pin setters as alleys quickly upgraded to keep the game fast and cut down on costs. Turning to a chillier scene, let's not forget the ice cutters of the pre-refrigeration era, unsung heroes in their own right. These rugged individuals ventured into the frozen wilderness, extracting ice from the frigid waters of lakes and rivers during the dead of winter. Armed with ice saws and chisels, they braved harsh conditions to carve out large blocks of ice, ensuring each piece was uniform for better storage. These ice blocks were then carefully transported to ice houses, insulated with sawdust to stave off melting, and used crucially for preserving food and providing cooling in homes and businesses. Ice cutting was a vital, albeit perilous, craft that required precision and resilience. Despite its importance, the rise of mechanical refrigeration in the early 20th century gradually rendered this arduous practice obsolete, closing the chapter on an essential but frosty part of history. Next, let's shine a spotlight on the Knockerupers, the human alarm clocks of yesteryears. In times when mechanical alarm clocks were a luxury, Knockerupers played a pivotal role in the bustling industrial cities. Armed with long sticks and pea shooters, They roamed the streets in the wee hours, tapping on windows to wake workers at precisely the right time. This profession demanded impeccable time management and unwavering reliability, as each morning they orchestrated the wake-up calls that ensured workers arrived at factories on time. The advent of affordable mechanical alarm clocks eventually signaled the decline of this unique profession. Despite the hardships, braving all weather conditions and navigating multiple routes daily, the Knockerupers were indispensable, ensuring that the wheels of industry kept turning without delay. Diving into the curious world of phrenology, this once popular field claimed that one's personality traits and intellectual capabilities could be deciphered from the bumps and contours of the skull. In the 19th century, phrenologists were viewed almost as celebrities, with people flocking to them for insights into their character and potential. They provided readings that captivated a diverse audience, from the curious individual intrigued by the prospect of understanding more about themselves to those seeking explanations for various personal and societal issues. However, as the scientific community advanced more empirically supported methods in psychology and neurology, phrenology's credibility waned. The field faced significant criticism for perpetuating social and racial inequalities under the guise of science, leading to its eventual rejection by mainstream science as understanding grew. Lamplighters, those iconic figures of the night, once lit the gas street lamps of urban landscapes, ensuring that the streets remained navigable and safe after dark. Each evening, as dusk fell, lamplighters would traverse the city streets, ladder and lighting torch in hand, igniting the lamps that lined the thoroughfares. This job required not only physical stamina to manage the equipment, but also resilience to all weather conditions. Lamplighters were more than just municipal workers. They were the nightly guardians of public safety, their flames keeping the darkness at bay and deterring potential miscreants. However, the introduction of electric street lighting brought a technological revolution that rendered their roles redundant. The shift to electric lighting was rapid and embraced widely for its increased efficiency and lower maintenance, ultimately leading to the disappearance of lamplighters from our streets, marking the end of a glowing era. Imagine the life of a chimney sweep back in the day. Yes, it was as grimy and perilous as it sounds. Young apprentices, often just kids, shimmying up narrow, soot-lined chimneys, facing the carcinogenic dangers of soot and the physical risks of high falls. Passed down from father to son, this craft was more of a survival skill than a mere job. Yet, as homes warmed up with the advent of gas and electric heating, the demand for these traditional sweeps waned. But don't be fooled. The chimney sweep hasn't vanished. They've evolved using advanced technology to ensure chimneys are safe from fire hazards and educating homeowners on heating safety. Today, they're more tech-savvy guardians than soot-covered sprites, equipped with sophisticated tools and adhering to strict safety standards, ensuring that the chimneys they maintain are not just clean, but safe for modern households. Aircraft listeners were crucial in early air defense systems, especially before the widespread use of radar. Using large acoustic mirrors and sophisticated listening devices, they would detect the presence of incoming aircraft by sound, a method that required sharp hearing and extreme concentration. The job was particularly challenging during adverse weather conditions or at night, when visibility was poor and sounds were harder to distinguish. The development of radar technology was a significant advancement that provided a more reliable means of tracking aircraft, leading to the obsolescence of aircraft listeners. Despite some notable successes in early warning, the role was generally phased out as radar became the standard for air defense. Those employed as aircraft listeners often transitioned to other roles within military or civil defense organizations, adapting their skills to new technologies and changing defense strategies. Clockwinders were the unsung heroes of timekeeping, whose meticulous craft was essential for maintaining public and private clocks across towns and cities. These skilled individuals climbed towers and reached into the intricate interiors of large mechanical clocks to wind them manually, ensuring that everything from town hall clocks to church bells operated on time. The physical demands of the job were matched by the need for a deep understanding of mechanical workings, as any lapse could disrupt daily life and schedules. However, the relentless march of technology rendered their role largely obsolete. The adoption of electronic and battery-operated clocks meant fewer clock winders were needed. Yet, in some historical settings, the tradition persists, maintaining the heritage and mechanics of antique timepieces, a reminder of the past's reliance on human touch for precision. Linotype operators were at the heart of the printing revolution, operating complex machines that were marvels of mechanical engineering. These operators needed keen eyes and steady hands to manage the linotype machine's keyboard, casting lines of type in hot metal for newspapers and books. The precision required was immense. A single error could cost time and money, necessitating meticulous attention to detail. As the digital age dawned, the linotype was replaced by digital typesetting, which offered greater speed and accuracy. This shift required operators to either adapt to new technologies or find different paths in their careers. Today, the linotype machine stands as a symbol of the printing industry's storied past, celebrated for its role in democratizing information, but relegated to history by the advance of technology. Lectors had a unique and vital role in the industrial era, particularly within the echo-filled halls of cigar factories. They were the voices that broke the monotony of manual labor, reading aloud everything from news to novels, enriching the minds of workers. This role was not just about entertainment. It was a critical component of worker satisfaction and mental engagement, helping to boost morale and productivity. However, as radios and other forms of media became commonplace in factories, the need for a human lector diminished, leading to the profession's gradual decline. The legacy of lectors lives on in discussions about labor conditions and the holistic needs of workers, reminding us of the times when a human voice was a beacon of culture and education amidst the drudgery of repetitive tasks. Log drivers were vital in the lumber industry, expertly guiding logs down rivers to sawmills before modern transportation methods like trucks and railways emerged. These individuals navigated atop floating logs, using long poles to steer and dislodge jams, demanding great physical agility and deep knowledge of river currents and obstacles. Their work was essential but perilous, heavily dependent on seasonal river conditions. While log drivers were economically beneficial to riverside communities, their activities also disrupted local ecosystems. As more advanced transportation technologies developed, the need for log driving diminished, leading to its decline by the mid-20th century. Today, the legacy of log drivers is celebrated in cultural events and historical commemorations, honoring their bold and skillful contributions to the timber industry. Rag and bone men were the original recyclers long before the green movements of modern times took root. These industrious individuals scoured the streets, gathering unwanted household items such as rags, bones, metals, and scraps, which were either sold or directly repurposed in various industries. Bones, for instance, were often processed into glue, fertilizers, and animal feed, while rags found new life in papermaking. Operating on the fringes of the economy, rag and bone men played a pivotal role in the urban recycling ecosystem, contributing significantly to waste reduction efforts. However, as cities evolved and formal recycling programs emerged, the need for these men diminished. Despite this decline, their legacy persists, reminding us of the ingenuity required to turn everyday waste into valuable resources, a practice that has only gained importance in our current environmental context. Ratners, or rat catchers, were once vital figures in urban centers, tasked with controlling rat populations to prevent disease and maintain sanitation. These specialists employed a variety of techniques, including the use of dogs, ferrets, and traps. to manage or eliminate rats, which were common carriers of disease. Working primarily on a freelance basis, Ratners were often hired by households or businesses rather than being employed by municipal governments. Their work was not only perilous, given the risks of bites and infections, but also carried a social stigma due to the nature of their tasks. With the advent of modern pest control technologies, including chemical and integrated pest management strategies, the traditional rat catcher's role has largely been phased out, replaced by more sophisticated and less hazardous methods. Mudlarking, the practice of scavenging along riverbanks, particularly the Thames in London, has a rich and poignant history. Initially a survival tactic for the city's poorest, especially children, mudlarks searched for coal, coins, metal, and occasionally valuable artifacts, turning the river's refuse into a source of livelihood. This activity not only helped clean urban waterways, but also provided a critical, if meager, source of income for those involved. Over time, as the Thames was cleaned and municipal waste management improved, the necessity for mudlarking as a means of subsistence declined. Today, mudlarking has transformed into a regulated hobby, with enthusiasts equipped with permits searching for historical artifacts rather than subsistence. This shift reflects broader changes in how societies view and manage waste, as well as a growing public interest in historical preservation. Early human computers, mostly women, manually performed complex mathematical calculations, vital for fields like astronomy, engineering, and military operations. The introduction of mechanical and later electronic computers revolutionized data processing, significantly speeding it up. Recruited for their mathematical skills and academic backgrounds, these pioneers paved the way for modern computing. Their contributions are especially notable in software development and data science, underscoring the critical, yet often unrecognized role of women in technological and scientific progress. Their legacy serves as a powerful reminder of the essential human aspect in the evolution of technology. Slubberdoffers were essential in the textile industry, responsible for swapping full bobbins with empty ones on spinning frames, a task requiring quick precision to meet the fast pace of mills. As technological advancements ushered in automated machinery, the demand for slubberdoffers decreased, boosting production efficiency, but also displacing many workers. Traditionally, this role demanded physical agility and a deep understanding of the machinery, skills often acquired through direct experience or informal apprenticeships. Nowadays, the functions of slubberdoffers are fulfilled by automated systems in modern textile manufacturing, which execute these tasks with higher accuracy and less human involvement. This shift not only mirrors broader industrial automation trends, but also underscores significant changes in labor requirements and skill sets. Signalmen were once essential to the safe and efficient operation of railways and maritime transport, responsible for communicating and coordinating the movement of trains and ships. They managed signals to prevent collisions and ensure timely travel. However, as technology evolved, the role of signalmen was profoundly impacted. The introduction of telegraphs and later radios allowed for more direct and rapid communication, which enhanced safety and operational efficiency. A typical day for a signalman involved constant vigilance, monitoring signals and communicating with other railway personnel to manage train schedules and track usage. Over time, with advancements in automated signaling systems and centralized traffic control, the traditional role of signalman has diminished, being replaced by more technologically advanced roles that require different skills, such as system monitoring and network management. That wraps up the list of dangerous antics that people got up to in the 1970s which are not allowed anymore. Tell us your thoughts in the comments below and subscribe for more.